Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Aaron from Finkton Languages, and welcome to another live stream Friday. So I don't have anyone logged in viewing yet, but we'll just hang out and talk a little bit. If I have to, I'll just talk to myself. Excuse me. Anyways, I'm, most of you know I'm back in America. My work schedule has been a little bit crazy lately. I was working a full-time job in Thailand, moved back to America, and then I was just quarantined with no job for a while. Now I'm starting to pick up a little bit of steam, doing private lessons, Spanish and English lessons mostly, and guitar lessons. And I was planning on starting a full-time job starting this week, and then now I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be focusing mostly on lessons. But anyways, good news with that is that I'll have more time for doing videos and live streams and stuff. So thanks to everyone who's here joining. I'm interested in where you are, where you're from, what country you're in or what state you're in, and what languages you're learning and what your native language are. So yeah, just leave me a message and leave me a little comment below, and that'll get our conversations rolling. For those who don't know, I am from Wisconsin in the north of the United States. It is currently 1:30 in the afternoon here, and I'm currently learning Greek, trying to maintain Thai as much as I can. I'm also trying to maintain Spanish and French. I don't put as much effort into those because I've already reached a pretty high level in those. Banana Tree Labs says, Toki, Banana Tree Labs, thanks for coming. Daniela says, hola, hoy llegué a tiempo. Gracias por venir. Yes, I'm doing it a little bit later than normal, just because I was a little bit busy this afternoon, this morning. I am planning new project with a couple of other language YouTubers, and we're not quite ready to release the details about that, but we will soon. And essentially, we are creating a new YouTube channel and a few other things. I'm not going to say too much about it yet. I will still be maintaining this channel and releasing videos twice a week, just like usual, but this is something else I'm doing else on top on the side. So thanks again to everyone who's joining. Let me know where you are, what country you're from, what language you're learning. Amit says, hi, Finktam, Tam. Hello. The real trivia question is, do you know what my name means? Finktam. Do you know what language it's in? Some of you will know. Hi guys, I'm from Brazil, currently learning French, trying. Well, you're in the right place. Thanks for joining. There's something in a language that I don't speak, and I don't even know what it is. Thoughts on Matt versus Japan? Don't know too much about Matt versus Japan. I do follow him on Twitter. I recently had a long video interview with John Siebold, which you can go back and see. I think it was my last video that I released. Actually, released it earlier this week. I had a conversation specifically on that topic with John Siebold because John is learning Japanese, I guess, using the approach that Matt versus Japan uses, which is like mass immersion, just soaking yourself and listening to the language all day long. And without really a emphasis on comprehensible input. And that's where I would probably disagree with him. I wouldn't disagree adamantly with him, but I would probably say I don't want to use that approach. I'm not really interested in listening. I'm not interested in input unless it's comprehensible input. I want to be able to understand what I'm reading and listening to in my target language. All right, I've said this before. If I just pick up Crime and Punishment in Russian and I start flipping through pages, looking at every word, doesn't matter how long I'm going to read Crime and Punishment, I will never learn Russian that way. I could read through the whole book 100 times, and by the end, I will not know one word in Russian, okay? Because it's not comprehensible. Now, I could pick up a few children's books in Russian that have pictures and illustrations to go along with the words, and if I look through those 100 times, I might start to understand what's going on in the story, and I might learn a little bit of Russian. Okay, I see that this word comes up very often on pages where it has a bear on the page, so maybe this word means bear, you know, and if I spent a lot of time doing that, I might eventually learn a little bit of Russian. Okay, is that the most effective way to learn a language? No, but if I have a native speaker or a tutor help me understand what's going on each page, then I will start to understand Russian and I will learn it quickly, right? But it's because I first understood the message of what was happening on the page and then I understood the words. So that's why I prefer comprehensible input over just mass input. All right, Costanza says, hi, I'm Costanza from Paraguay. I'm also trying to learn French, haha. Awesome. What do you speak natively, Spanish or Guarani? From Paraguay. Deborah says, hello, also from the Midwest of the US, learning Spanish and Serbian. That's an interesting choice. Why Serbian? Just out of curiosity. All right, Career Love says, from Northern California, learning Finnish, Italian, and Armenian. Was your previous comment in Finnish? Because I looked at that and I didn't know what language it was, but for some reason I just thought that looks like Finnish to me. And I didn't ask that, but it looks like Finnish. I don't know why. I have no reason to actually guess that. It's just what I thought. Beth Morton says, Finktam, I am A2 in the higher side, on the higher side, and I'm trying to get to B1. Do you have any recommendations? What language are you speaking? Fart. Oh, yes. Now I understand why you commented fart earlier. Because my name, Finktam, is Hungarian for I farted. Yes. Okay, so anyways, high A2 and trying to get to B1. What language are you learning, out of curiosity, before I answer your question? All right, Daniela Coronada says, I'm trying to improve my written English, and my challenge is change English Spanish more quickly for my classes. Yeah, it can be tough switching back and forth between languages, especially when you're trying to translate stuff. I had an experience one time on the Camino de Santiago. For those who don't know, the Camino de Santiago is like an 800-mile long walking path, depending on where you start. And I did this. I started in France, and I walked literally all the way across the entire country of Spain. And it took me a month and a half. And, you know, you meet a lot of cool people, and I got to practice a lot of languages. People come to this trail from all over the world. And as I'm walking, I meet some French guys who don't speak any English. And I'm like, awesome, opportunity for me to practice my French. And I'm talking to these guys. And then there's other Americans, and I'm talking to them. And then this group of us, we end up staying at this hostel. There's not really a hostel. They call them alberges, albergues. Salute, Forever Learning French. Thanks for joining. Anyways, the group of us decide to stay in this alberge for the night. It's albergue. And it's a Catholic hostel, alberge, and it's run by a priest. And we all sit down for dinner because they feed you along with your, getting a free bed for the night. You sit down, you eat dinner, and before we ate dinner, the priest said he wanted to say a few words, and he asked me if I could translate because I was the only one who spoke Spanish of the travelers, and I said yes. Problem was there was these French people who didn't speak any English, and I was also walking with some other Americans who didn't speak any Spanish, and so he asked me to translate into French and Spanish. So every time he would say something in Spanish, I would first translate it into English for my American friends, and then have to translate it into French for the French people that were staying there. And it was just too much. Like, it's hard for me to translate from one language into another, but from one language into two languages, I had my mind going in all these different directions, and it's just tough. It's hard. I know I could get better at doing that. I think that was a great exercise, and I was actually grateful for the opportunity, but it was not easy. I can tell you that. By the way, for everyone who's here right now, if you don't mind dropping me a thumbs up, a like, I would really appreciate that. That helps me just promote my channel a little bit more for every thumbs up I get. All right, anyways, back to questions. I'm trying to improve my written English. Yes. I don't do a whole lot of writing in my target languages, so I don't. I can't offer a whole lot of advice on that front, other than just keep practicing. Do a lot of reading. Okay, reading helps. You know, you'll get a lot more exposure to the way words are written. But yeah, I mean, practice writing. That's the only way you can get better, right? Finkdom, do you think that it is possible for me or for anyone to learn the IPA vowels of a target language by myself? Yes, absolutely. It's not only possible, it's easy. Just go to wikipedia.com and type in whatever language you're learning. Okay, you'll probably have to type in language, you know, the name of the language and then language. So Spanish language or French language, right? And then it'll pull up a page, a Wikipedia page that's all about the language that you're learning. And not only is it interesting to read about the history and, you know, the etymology and stuff, and the current politics and things that surround the language that you're learning. There will also be a section called phonology, and then you scroll down to phonology, and it will show you the IPA symbols. For those who don't know, IPA is the International Phonetic Alphabet. All right, and what that means is it's a way of writing. It's an alphabet that doesn't follow whatever writing system the language normally follows. It's a writing system that relates just one single letter per sound, okay? And one sound per letter, so that if you know this International Phonetic Alphabet, you can write out the way people are speaking and write out the way that words are pronounced. Or you can talk about how their pronunciation differs from standard pronunciation and stuff like that. Because the way that we normally write obscures pronunciation, and many different people will spell a word the same but pronounce it differently. And so the IPA kind of fixes that. Sorry, I know other people are joining. Thank you all for, hey, language come up. Thanks for joining. I'm going to get to all of your questions, but I talk a lot. So anyways, as far as the IPA goes, yeah, it's very easy just to go to Wikipedia and look up the language that you're learning, then scroll down to the phonology section, and that should give you a good start on understanding the vowels and the consonants in the language that you're learning. Okay. Beth Morton says, I am learning Spanish. She says, I am A2 level on the higher side and trying to get to B1. Right, so A2 to B1, you're at the point now where you can start having conversations. Okay, I would use HelloTalk, the app, or any other app that can get you in contact with native speakers. iTalki is a good one if you don't mind paying a little bit. The other thing I would do is start reading a lot. You're at the point now where you can start reading some basic short stories. Pretty simple. You can get my book that I wrote, El Dragoncito. I put it on Amazon, on Kindle, and that would be right around your level, A2 to B1. Also, I really recommend Link. You can get a subscription to Link for about $10 a month. And that's a really good, useful tool for making content more comprehensible as you read, because every time you run into a word you don't understand, you just click on it and it gives you a definition, and then you can quiz yourself later on the words that you didn't know. So Link is really great. That's LINGQ, Link. LINGQ. And I can actually get you a discount on the subscription too as well. I can put that in the comments here as well. So link. And Link has a they have a free trial version. There you go. Link has a free trial version, but it sucks. And it's really a shame because Link is such a great product. I just love this product. I always recommend it. But the free trial sucks. It's not even worth it. Like, it's not a good representation of how good the product is. All right, Deborah, I asked her why she's learning Serbian, and she said, a very good friend is Serbian, and I'm intrigued by his language and culture. Awesome. Yeah, that's the best reason to learn a language, when you know someone that speaks the language, or if you know a lot of people speak the language. Right now I'm learning Greek, and I don't know anyone who speaks Greek, so I have no one to practice with. I can find people. I'm not worried about finding people. In fact, I just messaged a tutor on Link to help me with Greek. But also, I'm not like super concerned with pushing myself really hard to learn quickly. So it's not an emergency, All right, Costanza says, I speak Spanish, but I know a little Guarani too. Yeah, I thought my understanding was that most people from Paraguay speak Guarani as a native language and Spanish as a second language, but I could be wrong. I don't, I'm not super up to date on language politics in South America. All right, what do you think about language deafness, i.e. adults lose the ability to hear phonemes in their target language after a certain age? To me, I personally experienced that if you slow down videos and try to zero in on sounds, you can actually hear the small nuances. I think that this deafness concept is complete BS. Well, it exists, right? To a certain extent. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but we've proven that children are able to hear all of the different speech sounds that exist, okay? They're able to hear all of the nuance. Like, when I say children, I mean babies, infants, newborns, okay? And then by 6 months or something, they start, and I'm not making this up, first language acquisition experts have done research, and they've done experiments, and they've proven this, that children around the 6 months to a year start losing the ability to hear the difference between all different speech sounds, okay? Now, of course, every language uses different sounds, right? Spanish has that r sound, and English has and 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 ol, and other difficult sounds that other people might not be able to pronounce. And French has r and e. And whatever language you're learning, it has some sounds that English doesn't have, right? Other languages, every language has difficult sounds. And as infants, we're able to distinguish between all of those different sounds. But between the ages of like 6 months to a year, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, children start categorizing all of these sounds into boxes. They compartmentalize all these sounds, okay? So if they hear r, to them that might, eventually that starts to sound more like a h, right? Because we have h in English, that's the letter H in English, and we don't really have a r sound, r. So we just make it sound like that. We say that sounds kind of like this, so that falls into the H box, right? Or in Spanish, they don't have t, right? They have th, but not t, and they don't have th, okay? But th, what's that sound like? Kind of sounds like an F, or it sounds like a T sound a little bit. So you compartmentalize that sound into one of the boxes that your language already has, all right? And as you get older, it becomes more and more difficult to hear sounds that fall outside of the boxes that your language already has. You can learn it, and if you listen very carefully, you can hear the difference. So it's not deafness, but it really becomes a lot more difficult to recognize the speech sounds that don't exist in your language. Okay, and if you do hear them, you will tend to perceive them as variations of the speech sounds that do exist in your language. All right. All right. Language come up says, "Sup, man? Glad I can finally catch one live. Usually working, but a student canceled, so here I am. Almost done with your challenge, by the way. Awesome. Yeah, we're currently going through the 30-day record yourself challenge, which has been a really big help to people. The premise is that you just record a short video of yourself, like a 1-minute video, speaking your target language every day. And I release a schedule with a bunch of different questions and topics for you to talk about once a day. And then, you get a lot of feedback and corrections from native speakers and from more advanced learners. And it's, it's just a good way to go about practicing your language. So if you're interested in that, you can Google 30-day record yourself challenge, or hashtag 30DRYC. That's the 30-day record yourself challenge. All right. Diana Aubrey says, ever considered learning a completely different structured language? I'm learning Hebrew right now, and so many of your learning advices don't really help there because reading is so much harder. Yeah, I guess I have. I learned Thai, which is completely different than any language I've ever learned. Also, Toki Pona is pretty different. Right now I'm learning Greek, which is different, but not quite as different as Thai or Toki Pona. Yeah, it's some languages are harder than other languages that you might learn. It's not to say that one language is harder in general, but it will be harder for you to learn certain language than other languages. And you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt, especially if you're learning something that's very different. All right. I couldn't use Link. Link is one of my favorite programs for learning languages. I couldn't use it because it didn't exist in Thai, so I had to use workarounds. Do I have any here? I got myself some children's books and I spent time reading those, right? Because I wasn't able to do it on Link or on any apps. Okay, career love. I'm learning Armenian too. Nice. It's always nice when you run into someone who's learning the same language. All right, I like you. I'm interested in SLA. Apart from Crashin, are you aware of any major players in the field, or is it basically just him and his related team? No, not by any means. There's hundreds, thousands of researchers in SLA. Crashin actually, he's more interested in the applied linguistics side. And so he talks about like language education and things we can do in the classroom to get people learning better and stuff like that. I can't off the top of my head name you a whole bunch of people that you should be reading, but for example, one of them is Larry Selinker, who came up with the term interlanguage, and that's what a lot of what you're studying when you study second language acquisition. The theory being that you have the language, your native language that you speak, and you have your target language that you're trying to learn. And then in between those two, not even necessarily in between, but just as a separate entity in and of itself, you have what we call your interlanguage, which is what you're actually speaking when you're trying to speak your target language. And this interlanguage will follow rules all on its own that might not even exist in either your native language or your target language. And ideally, you want to bring your interlanguage closer and closer to the target language. It's at least how this concept has been explained to me. And they've done a lot of research on this, and it's one theory or one way of looking at it. All right. Sansa says, no, you're right, haha, but I'm from the capital and the Spanish is predominantly spoken here. What's the capital of Paraguay? Asunción. But we learn Guarani in school. Cool. All right. Yeah, one of my Spanish linguistics teachers in Mexico would always point out the explosive T in my speech. Yeah, and like it's not wrong. That's we would naturally do that as English speakers. We have the T phoneme or the T. That's a speech sound that exists within the speech sound inventory in our language. It doesn't exist in Spanish. All right, so it's not a toro. It's not a toro. It's a toro, right? There is no T. Same in French, right? If you're saying La Tour Eiffel, it's not La Tour, it's La Tour, right? La Tour, La Tour. I'm mixing up all my languages now. La Tour Eiffel, right? But when we hear someone speaking a different language, it's really hard to pick up on those differences, because in my language that I grew up with, in the language that is entrenched in the neural pathways in my brain, I hear someone start a sound with start a word with a T, and to me that starts with an aspirated T. Okay, not a T. An unaspirated B. It starts with a T if it's at the beginning of a word. And it just takes a little bit of work to unlearn all of that when you're learning a new language. Forever Learning French says, Quid neuf? What are the pros and cons to booking an italki community tutor versus a professional tutor? I don't know, because I have never even bothered booking a professional tutor. I book community tutors because they're cheaper generally. I wouldn't be opposed to a professional tutor, but when I talk to someone on italki, I really don't want someone who's gonna like sit down with me and go through a book, okay, or teach me grammar rules. I'm not looking for someone to teach me how to conjugate verbs. I don't want them showing me charts and doing drills with me. I'm not saying all that stuff is useless, but I can do it on my own time. And it is close to useless, in my opinion. What I really want when I'm speaking to someone on italki is someone to speak with. I want them to talk to me. I want them to correct some of the things that I'm saying wrong. But mostly I'm just looking for a conversation partner. Someone who will maybe teach me new words and will help me along, and someone who will just be patient with me when I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. That's what I want, and that's what I am paying them for. All right. So yeah, in that sense, if I'm speaking to a native speaker, then I can really pay for almost the cheapest, right? I want them to be like patient, and there's a few qualities that I do want them to have. I want them to be a little bit knowledgeable about the language itself, but for the most part, I just want someone that will talk to me. Como maestra de español, el mayor reto es la R y las vocales con los angloparlantes, sin duda. So the hardest part of learning Spanish is the R and the vowels for English speakers. Yeah, it's weird. I guess I was just one of those lucky people who was already able to do the rolled R in Spanish before I learned. It's really hard though, trying to learn how to do a sound that doesn't exist in your language. Okay, because it's just something that you've never had to learn to do with your tongue. So how do you explain it to someone? Like you can't wiggle their tongue around for them. You just have to practice and like make weird sounds with your mouth, trying to get it closer. You try to get a little bit closer to the sound that you hear other people producing. But if you don't know how to do the r, it's not going to help to have someone explain to you how to do it. No more than it will help to have someone explain, this is how you swim, right? you have to practice it, and you have to flounder around in the water a little bit before you get the hang of it. There's no real easy way. There's no shortcut to getting to pronounce. I had a friend who could not pronounce the R sound in French. You know, there's nothing you can do if you don't know it. All you can do is, it's going to be messy, and you just keep trying, you just keep practicing. Once in a while, you'll notice yourself get a little bit closer to reproducing the sounds that native speakers are making. Yeah, other than that, I'm sorry, I don't have anything good to say, other than you just got to keep doing it, keep practicing. What are your thoughts on how to develop a good language learning plan to be focused in my studies, to accomplish and to progress in a more systematic way that builds? Yeah, so you're gonna want like to use resources that can scale upwards, right? Duolingo is, I think, fine for if you're at an A1 level or trying to reach an A1 level. Rosetta Stone, maybe, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of resources out there for teaching you basic phrases in the language that you're learning, but that doesn't scale, right? Once you've memorized the basic phrases in the language, where do you go from there? That app that you just paid for has now become useless. A few apps that, in my opinion, scale upwards are Link, because no matter what you're reading, no matter what level you are, you can always read something in your target language. Okay, whether it's a children's book, whether it's one of the mini stories on Link, or whether it's a novel, you can always find something to read. So I think Link scales upwards. To some extent, Anki and Memrise are going to be useful for a long time. And they're going to help you with one of the most important things: learning more vocabulary, learning words, verbs, nouns, adjectives. Those are the, probably the most important three. Adverbs, pronouns. Well, you should learn all your pronouns and prepositions and stuff like that pretty early on. All your closed class words. But open classes like nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, those are words that you're going to spend a long time learning, okay? And even in Spanish to this day, I can always learn new vocabulary. Even in English, okay? So you will never learn as much vocabulary as you need to. Are you always going to want to be using Memrise to learn new words in your target language? No, probably not. So at a certain point, you'll stop using it. But in my opinion, SRS, spaced repetition systems, will last you a long time. The other thing is people to practice with. Okay, so iTalki, HelloTalk, Reddit or Facebook groups dedicated to the language that you're learning, chat rooms, community meetups, things like that. You'll be able to use those forever. No matter how much of the language you learn, you're always going to be able to enjoy having a conversation with other people in that language. Okay, so you'll never run out of that. That's my advice. Saluton! Happy Friday to you. Felichan Vendredon Alvi. What do you think about learning constructed languages like Esperanto, which don't have a cultural connotation, geographical identity, and years of evolution, unlike other contemporary languages? Well, I'd say you're wrong on two out of three accounts. Esperanto doesn't really have a geographical identity per se, but anyone who says Esperanto doesn't have a culture is wrong. You're just wrong. There is Esperanto culture. And I can't explain it to you unless you experience it. All right, you can see it a little bit. You can go on my Esperanto channel and see some of the fun things in Esperanto culture. That's Fingtam Esperanto, by the way, if people are interested. Fingtam That's my other channel. Okay, we're doing the 30-day record yourself challenge right now, which ironically, actually, it's a 30-day challenge where you record yourself speaking in just a short video every day in your target language. For me, it's Esperanto. And this month's version, ironically, is actually all questions that have to do with Esperanto culture. So yeah, that's Esperanto does have a culture. It's not a culture. It's not ancient like other cultures. But no, culture is always changing. No culture is really truly ancient. We always bring new things into it. And same thing has been happening with Esperanto, right? Esperanto isn't the same, and Esperanto culture is not the same as it was in the 1800s when it was first founded. New things are being added all the time. What advice would you give to someone interested in pursuing a career in linguistics? I don't know. That's hard to say. What kind of career are you pursuing in linguistics? It's a very broad field. Do you have any idea, like specifically, what do you want to do? Do you want to go into translation? Because that's really a field in itself. A lot of people think linguistics. A lot of people think a linguist is just someone who speaks many languages, and speaking other languages really has nothing to do with being a linguist. Linguists are interested in studying human language as a whole. Okay, you can only speak one single language but be a student and be a researcher and study how language works. Okay, that's what a linguist is. So hopefully you're interested in that first of all. Secondly, just do a lot of research. I have a Linguistics 101 video series that can get you started and see if you are interested in that. Another great channel is the Ling Space, Moti Lieberman. There's some good books you can read. What do I have here? Here's one. This was my my textbook in my Linguistics 101 class in college. The Study of Language by George Ewell. I think that book's like, I don't know, 15 or 20 bucks on Amazon. Okay, how is your Thai language? My D. Yak rianภาษา Thai แต่ยากมาก. So anyways, my Thai is not going super well. I am trying to at least maintain Thai by doing weekly lessons, but I haven't really put a whole lot of work into that. I love learning grammar and conjugations, but I love to do it alone in my own way. And that's fine if you're interested in learning grammar and rules and stuff like that. I don't have anything against that per se. Just don't be under the impression that once you learn all the rules and master all the conjugations that you will then be fluent in the language, because that's a very different skill set. Like I always say, it's the difference between memorizing all your swimming strokes and actually being able to swim. Okay, it's very different. One thing that could be really useful to you if you're interested in grammar and want to learn more about it is something like this. Here's Introducción a la Lingüística Española. It's a linguistics book about the Spanish language that explains has a lot of information about how Spanish syntax and phonology works, but it's written in Spanish. So you're getting practice reading Spanish at the same time as you're learning about grammar and structure and things like that. Okay, yes, as an Arabian, it's hard for me to spell the American flat T. Any advice? I think you mean it's hard to pronounce the flat T. So yeah, in American English, we have this strange phenomenon where the letter T can be pronounced in a whole bunch of different ways. It's not a strange phenomenon. It's actually very normal. At the beginning of a word, the T, there's a little puff of air that comes out, right? So like T, you see how my puff of air moves that the paper. But sometimes when it's in the middle of a word, your puff of air won't. Like potato, potato. You see how the pate, I have that little puff of air. We call that an aspiration. And the pate has that, but the dough doesn't. So potato has two different types of T's in it. Okay. And the second T is what we call flap, because you're not even really stopping the airflow all that much, rather than just flapping your tongue up to the top of your mouth and only hindering the airflow for just a second. You know, it's just that long. Potato, right? And a lot of times that comes out sounding like a D sound. So when we say water, it's not an actual D sound. I don't say water, right? But it comes out pretty close to that, water, because it is voiced, water. But it's not a T, water. It's similar to that, but it's a lot faster and there's no aspiration. Similar thing happens with a D, okay? So when I'm gonna climb a ladder, I don't say I'm gonna climb the ladder, I say ladder, at least in American English. And sometimes that makes things a little bit sticky when we say like, would you prefer the former or the latter? How is that pronounced any different from the word ladder? Climb a ladder? And the answer is they're not. At least in my dialect, ladder and ladder are pronounced exactly the same. So you could call that like the ladder merger. Or the latter merger. If you have a dialect that doesn't do that. So I would say an easier thing to do if you're trying to pronounce an American T between two vowels. The rule is that when you have the letter T in between two vowels and the first vowel is stressed, like in water or potato, then that's when you flap your T. And I don't know, I guess I would say maybe the easiest way is to pronounce it like a D, but not quite as hard, not as forceful. That would be my advice. All right. Ali, what is your native language? Oh, he's talking to someone else. My native language is English. I don't know if you can tell. Okay, try to say better and try to repeat the double T sound by vibrating your tongue. Yeah. Yeah, also depending on what language you speak. Like Spanish speakers don't need to try, because the flapped T in English is pronounced basically exactly like an R in Spanish, right? So you take the word like Harry Potter, yeah, if you take the word Potter and just change the last R to an A, para, that's how they pronounce the word para, for, right? P-A-R-A. So Harry Potter and para ti, these are word, for some reason the T in English ended up sounding a lot like the R in Spanish. Hey, Gabe Tozarin, thanks for joining. Also, Jameson, greetings from the Philippines. Greetings from America. I love the idea of the 30-day record yourself challenge. Already recorded the first day. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. A lot of people have told me it's been very helpful and very motivational for them. So I'm really excited that I was able to help a lot of people in that way. I've heard that Esperanto was an artificially created language, but since its creation, it has been developing in very much the same way a natural language does. Yeah, I would say that's true. Maybe a little bit slower. Different languages resist change differently. Like apparently the Lithuanian language has remained conservatively the same over the last like 5,000 years, not the same, but closer to the same, more so than any other language from the Indo-European family. And they just age differently, right? Like, I guess Italian is a more conservative language than like French, which means Italian is probably a little bit closer to the original Latin than French ended up being. In Esperanto, a lot of, there's a debate in Esperanto. Do we stick to exactly the way that L.L. Zamenhof meant for it originally? Is there a little bit of room for play and like bringing in new words into the language? But overall, I wouldn't say it's changed a whole lot. I'm not an expert in that field. There have definitely been some changes and some things that have fallen out of use. But it's changed just like a normal language. Maybe not quite as much as some of the more little languages that change more radically. All right. How do you hear a new sound in practice when you are learning a foreign language? One of the things I like to do is use Pimsleur, okay? Because they have a native speaker speak to you. You can buy Pimsleur CDs on eBay for relatively cheap. They have the native speaker speak, and then they give you a moment to try to repeat it. And you try to repeat the way the way the native speaker sounds as closely as possible, okay? So if you're learning French, you'll hear the native speaker on Pimsleur say, tu, 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 right? Or vous, vous et tu, right? And rather than hearing tu, you try to say it as close as possible to what they're saying. Tu, tu, right? And it might be difficult at first because in English, we like to start our T's. We like to start our words with aspirated T's. So we'll say tu, right? And we don't have that E sound in English. We have oo, we have E, we have oo, but we don't have E. Okay, so pronouncing a tu is going to be a little bit harder for us. But you just try to pronounce it as close as possible to whatever they're doing without filtering it through your native language. It's hard to do, but it just takes practice. Can you share your Thai learning materials? Yeah, when I was learning Thai, I used Pimsleur. Glossica was, I thought was all right. Mango languages, I used a lot at the beginning. That was one of the better ones. Italki. I did tutoring with Italki tutors like twice a week. Also, ThaiPod 101. I used that. I listened to the Thai podcasts, and they also had like reading exercises that I would do, and so that was pretty helpful. There aren't a whole lot of resources for Thai. It was really hard for me to get good resources in the Thai language. It was really frustrating. Sometimes it's difficult when the students, what the students want. As a Spanish teacher, I know what you mean about the knowledge about grammar versus speaking, but I think it's important to know the rules. I disagree. I don't think it's important to know the rules. It's more important to be able to speak the language. You can absolutely speak correctly without knowing the rules. Okay. Now, if you're going to take a test, right? Like if your goal is to ace a test, then yeah, you just got to know the rules. Okay. But it's going to always be better to be able to speak correctly rather than being able to know, well, in this sentence, I'm supposed to use the second conditional or the past tense of the subjunctive, right? That information just isn't useful if you know how to speak correctly, or at least in a way that communicates what you're trying to communicate, right? Because all the time, native speakers always speak in a way that's quote unquote incorrect. But what that really means is we just don't follow prescriptivist rules, right? We speak with our own manner of speaking. And it's fine. There's no problem with that. And it just depends on what you want to do, though, right? If you're going to a job interview, or if you're going to work in academia or do something that requires you to, then you're going to want to follow the prescriptivist rules more to a T than if you're just going to a party because, if you're learning a language because you want to hang out with people, or you're learning a language because you're dating someone who speaks that language, or you just want to have friends in another language, and who cares about if you break the grammar rules or not? They break the grammar rules too, right? The rules aren't important. It depends what you're learning the language for. Okay, if you're learning the language for work, then you probably will. Yes, you'll want to learn to speak with a more academic, with a more formal style that follows the long-established rules of academia. All right. Are you getting money from YouTube? Yeah, I make a little bit of money on YouTube. It's not very much. I mean, it's not like enough to support me. Still need a job. That's why I teach lessons. By the way, if anyone is interested in taking Spanish lessons or English lessons or maybe even French lessons, you can message me about that. How did you improve your listening skills in Spanish, especially Castellano, which I found they talk pretty fast in other Spanish-speaking countries? Conversations, talking to people. I also did a lot of listening to audiobooks. And so I would get like children's books. I listened to the Chronicles of Narnia in Spanish. I listened to The Little Prince translated into Spanish. What else? I listened to a lot of audiobooks. Podcasts. There's a really good podcast called SLA Workshop that I love. SLA Workshop. I'll put that in the chat. All right, it's called SLA Workshop, and it's bilingual. So every episode of the show is done in English first and then in Spanish. And they're listed as separate episodes, but it's the same episode, just translated. And when he speaks Spanish, it's so easy to understand. He's a native speaker of Spanish, but he speaks so slowly and so clearly. It's a great listening tool for listening for just improving your listening skills in Spanish or in English because he speaks very clearly in English too. What are all the languages that you consider yourself fluent in? I don't know what fluent means, honestly. I say this all the time. So I'm fluent in English. We know this. I would say most people would probably say I'm fluent in Spanish. I don't really have a whole lot of trouble. I make mistakes in Spanish. I still speak with an accent, but I can carry on conversation all day long in Spanish and talk about pretty complex things. I can do the same in French. I make more mistakes in French, and my accent is probably a little bit worse. And I'll run into a lot more walls where I don't understand, or I don't know, like I'm looking for a word that I just don't know the word. That happens more often in French for me. Same as in Esperanto. In Thai, most people would probably say I'm not fluent, although I can have long conversations in Thai. It's just a lot more work. Okay. I don't know. That's all I can. I can't give you a list of languages that I'm fluent in. Languages just don't work that way. Yeah. So whenever someone asks me that, I just explain. Yeah. I'll let you decide for yourself what you mean by fluent. All right. How important do you think proficiency certificates are? I don't know. I don't have one. They're not important. I don't know. It depends what you want it for. I mean, I get, there's valid uses for them. I guess if you need a certificate to get into school or for a job or something like that, then it's useful. I've never bothered because I don't really care if I'm A1 or A2 or, B2 or C1. It's just numbers to me. My goal is to be able to speak to people, right? And I can do that without a certificate. All right, I want to know more about the language maintenance and shit from among immigrants from East in the U.S. From a sociolinguistic point of view. What books should I start with? Any suggestions? Language maintenance. I don't know. I apologize. I have nowhere. I don't know how to help you with that. All right. Hello, my brother. What advice can you provide me for improving my writing skills? Yeah, this again goes back to I don't do a whole lot of writing in my target languages. I do a lot more speaking and listening and reading. Writing, I don't do a whole lot of. One thing that does help is messaging people. So if you can find someone to communicate with back and forth, just message back and forth. I also don't know what kind of writing you're talking about. Are you talking about like academic writing? If your language skill is already really good and you're just looking to improve like your academic writing, I would say practice. Maybe get a tutor, like get someone to correct your writings for you. So write a paper, bring it in. If you're in college, then you can bring it into the writer's workshop, and they'll usually have someone correct it for you and help you through determining how you want to improve your writing style. And then if you keep doing that slowly you'll just develop your own style, and you'll start to remember some of the points that they included along the way. But like I said, I don't do a whole lot of writing. Does SLA have other versions with other languages? So SLA is the study of how we acquire languages, which is in no way specific to any certain language. So that's just the field of second language acquisition covers all languages, right? It's not specific to any one language. Oh, saluton, Rafa. I agree with Daniel Coronada above about knowing the rules. I understand your point, but the difference is that native speakers know the rules instinctively. Well, I mean, if you say it like that, then yes. Most native speakers don't actually know the rules, right? What's the difference between who and whom, or we and us? Some of you probably know that one is nominative and the other one is the oblique case. Some of you probably, can you explain the difference between the words somebody and anybody? It's a little trickier. We don't know the rules, or at least we can't state them. We follow them instinctively. We have like an implicit understanding in the sense that we're able to produce them correctly, but that doesn't mean you have the rules up here. Like you haven't memorized those rules. Rafa says, even if they cannot explain them in words, non-native speakers do need to learn the rules as well. Again, even if they learn them passively by reading or listening. Yeah, so like if you internalize the rules by listening to how native speakers speak, and if you develop your language skills that way, and then you'll naturally start following the rules. What I was saying is that it's not important to memorize the rules, which sounds like you agree with. So yeah, that's true. Gabe says, yes, I think there's a difference between knowing the grammar instinctively when you're a native speaker versus when you're learning a new language. Yeah, and you can know grammar rules instinctively even if you're not a native speaker, right? You don't actually need to memorize the rules themselves or be able to explain the rules in order to be able to use them properly. All right, Gabe says, when you're learning, you must know if the verb comes first, or if it's the subject, or if it's the object, etc. Otherwise, the meaning can be lost. And I'm going to push back. It depends what you're saying here, okay? If I go up to my, let's say you have a 5-year-old nephew, 7-year-old nephew, perfect, fluent speaker of the English language. And you ask him, does the verb come first or does the subject come first in English? He probably won't know, okay? But he does instinctively put the subject before the verb in English. right? And so he follows the rules. In some sense, he has internalized the rules, but he never memorized them. That's my argument, which sounds like you guys probably agree with. So we don't need to spend a whole lot longer talking about that. Hello, could you please tell us what keeps you motivated when you face hardships during learning a new language? What keeps me motivated? Sometimes I don't stay motivated. Sometimes I just quit, and I'm not ashamed of that. Like if I have no motivation to keep going with a language, then I don't want to waste my time. My motivation is whatever reason I need to learn the language, which a lot of times is simply just the gratification that I get from being able to communicate with other people, right? Like I enjoy being able to go to Mexico and strike up a conversation with someone, or go to Quebec and not have to feel like the dumb American who only knows one language. And I get to know more people, right? Like I get to have deeper relationships with people if I'm able to communicate with them. All right, Rafa says, I do believe you that native speakers nowadays don't know the difference between who and whom. We agree there. Yes. I mean, honestly, the distinction between who and whom is really something that's going away. It's not something that even matters anymore most of the time. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help. How about a problem I face in speaking foreign language? That is, when I speak, I first think in my own language, and I hate this habit. What do you suggest? Yeah, that's a very common thing people talk about a lot. You first think of how to say it in your own language, then you translate it, and then you say it in the language you're learning. Problem with that is a lot of times when you do that, you'll translate things a little bit too literally, and it's not always the way things work in your target language. It's not always a problem, because usually people will understand what you mean, and in my experience, that's all that counts. Okay, unless it's something like you're going for a job interview, or like you need to learn language for work or something, then it's going to matter a little bit more. For me, 90% of the language that I use is chilling with my friends in another language, or otherwise possibly ordering something from a restaurant in another language, right? And people will usually figure out what you mean if you do that. Okay. With that said, if you're really dedicated to learning the language better, you don't want to just translate everything in your mind. And that just takes exposure. Reading in your target language, do it a lot. Try not to translate. Try just to look at the words. But that'll go away with exposure. I find that translation in your head happens a lot more often in the earlier stages. And then after a while, you don't even think about it anymore. All right. Daniela Coronada says, haha, I always have this conversations with other Spanish teachers. Very important to mention everybody learns in different ways. I have had students who want to learn grammar and others like you. Yeah, so, yeah, that's the thing. It depends why you're learning the language, right? A lot of people, especially in America, especially in high school and college, a lot of people are learning a language because it's a requirement for graduating, okay? And in that case, by all means, just learn the grammar rule and be done with it. You know, you don't need to internalize the language and put yourself through this whole thing. I wish more people would take time to really develop proficiency in other languages. But, you know, I don't judge anyone. I don't want to... you know, I'm not going to shame anyone for not wanting to learn a language. So if all you want to do is just pass the test and then get out of that class, you know, that's unfortunately that's what most of us do in this country. I also think that's partially because people just don't know how easy and how enjoyable it is to become proficient in another language. how many resources there are out there for you, and they just don't know the right way to do it. Unfortunately, most people think the way to learn a language is study grammar rules. Use flashcards and just learn, study vocabulary words. And don't say something until you know the grammar rules required to say it. It's like, no, you can have full conversations using poor grammar, right? And you can have conversations knowing full well you will make lots of mistakes, and you just don't care. That's totally reasonable. It takes a lot of guts to do that. Got to be kind of ballsy to go into a conversation with that, with that mindset. But it'll be a lot more enjoyable than I'm just going to wait until I know all of the grammar, until I know I'm going to speak correctly. And the reason being, because that day will never come. What do you think about the U.S. education system? It's weird for me as a European citizen that the vast majority of people can't speak a second language. Yeah, I mean, most people in America don't need a second language, right? Most of us, depends what part of the country you live in. Like if you're in California, Texas, Miami, maybe parts of New York, or like parts of big cities, other languages are more important. Where I live in Wisconsin, you can go your whole life without really ever having to speak another language. It's different in Europe, right? You live in Belgium, and then you go to France for dinner, and on the way back you stop in Luxembourg to see your aunt or something, and then you go back to Belgium, where you speak Flemish and French, depending on who you're hanging out with that day. With that said, I wish we could encourage more Americans to learn a language, show them that it's not that difficult, and that traveling and being able to have relationships with other people from a different country, different part of the world, it's really rewarding. And it makes you a better person. It makes you a more well-rounded person who can see things from perspectives just outside of the perspective that you have grown up in, right? You'll see people that live in different cultures who do things totally different from you, and you used to think was wrong, until you just realize that people in this other culture, it's just different. Doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong. It's just different. And I wish we could get more people to do that. Unfortunately, it's just not worth a lot of people's time and energy and mental brain power in America, because a lot of us won't. A lot of people just can't do it. Like most people can't afford to be taking trips to Europe for all the time. It's sad, but it's the way things are. All right, talk about applied linguistics. Wait, hold on. What do you think? Okay. Talk about applied linguistics. I can't talk too much about applied linguistics. I did major in applied linguistics, ironically, but I'm more interested in like theoretical, more general linguistics. Applied linguistics is just how we apply the study of linguistics into real world situations. Like the one that naturally comes up in my mind is second language education, right? We take things that linguists have studied and learned, and we bring it into the classroom and we teach it to people, right? And there's methods that we can study for, like, which method is best for doing that. Another one that comes to mind for me is like parts of sociolinguistics, like are we going to combat linguistic discrimination, right? There's been I don't know if any of you guys follow the language learning community on Twitter. There's been like this feud, like this battle going on with people regarding linguistic discrimination over the past few weeks. Man, some people have been leaving some really nasty comments. Unfortunately, people feel like linguistic discrimination isn't a real thing. Or maybe, people just aren't educated and just don't know what it is. But linguistic discrimination can take a lot of forms, and there's a lot of ways to combat it. And this is not my field of expertise, but it's a real field of study. What do we do, and how do we know? How do we respond to linguistic discrimination, right? And on the one hand, you could really focus on what aspect of languages are being discriminated against. And on another hand, you could start devising methods and campaigns and things to combat it. And that's more of an application of linguistic theory into the real world. So that's what applied linguistics is. If you're learning French, should you learn both Canadian and European French? And what are the major differences? Do what you want. Yeah, people always ask me, what should I do? And my question is like, what do you want to do? Right? That's usually how I respond. I am learning Canadian French mostly because I go to Canada a lot more than I go to France. There's a lot more resources for learning European French. Right, like there's a lot fewer people live in Quebec than in France. But I prefer Canadian French. Yeah, that's what I do. It's hard to find resources that teach you Canadian French. So a lot of what I do is I do a lot of listening to European resources and stuff like that. They're pretty close. Like they're mutually intelligible. It's like the difference between learning American English and British English or Spain Spanish and Mexican Spanish, right? Yeah, I would just ask you, what are your goals? Why are you learning French? Do you want to go to Paris? Learn Metropolitan French. Do you want to go to Montreal? Learn Canadian French, right? Are you not interested in travel? Oops, my laptop's about to die here. Are you not interested in travel and you just want to learn French for like academic purposes because you're interested? If that's the case, then learn both, and you'll be interested to see what the differences are, right? If that's the kind of thing you're interested in. What are the differences? There's a lot of differences in vocabulary, like in Quebec, they'll say mon char instead of ma voiture. I'll say ma blonde instead of ma copine. That kind of thing. I can't think of a whole bunch of them off the top of my head. Swear words are all different. In Quebec, you say tabarnak, which means tabernacle, or colis de Christ de Vierge. They're all like church words, right? Tabernacle, chalice, Eucharist, right? Like virgin. These are all swear words in Quebec. It's really funny, actually. Especially if you go to Quebec and you didn't know that. And you're like, man, these people are really religious for some reason. No, they're just cussing. There's also some grammatical differences, like you could say in Europe, you could say est-ce que tu veux, or veux-tu, whatever, veux-tu une baguette? Do you want a baguette? Correct me if I'm wrong. In Quebec, they say tu veux-tu une baguette? Right. So the word tu, it's first of all, it's a pronoun, which everyone knows, but it's also like a particle that that works as a question. So tu veux-tu means do you want, or I don't know, I can't think of anything. Il est-tu content? I'm not entirely sure if I'm using this correctly. I forget now. But I don't know. If you're asking a yes or no question, you just put "tu" at the end instead of "est-ce que" at the front. And that's a very Quebecois thing to do. Also, they use the word "p" for "and." I don't know. I can't do a whole lot more explaining than that. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I've missed so many questions here. I'm finally back. I went to the hospital where I was diagnosed with underactive thyroid. Oh, sorry to hear that. He says, thanks. Yeah, I'm feeling better. Well, it's good. Good to hear. Okay. Apart from communicating with people, do you have other goals for learning languages? Not usually. I guess, yeah, in this case, I'm learning Greek mostly because I'm just interested in the Greek language. I don't really want to communicate with people. I feel like I'll probably spend 4 or 5 months learning Greek and then like modern Greek. And then I also want to spend 4 or 5 months learning ancient Greek. And then I'm just interested to see what the differences are, just for like an educational thing. I don't really plan on ever speaking to someone. Oh, Rafa says, what are your favorite YouTubers that speak with a Quebec accent, by the way? What's her name? Like Desinte or something like that? Hold on, I gotta look this girl up. She's really funny. I'm just gonna say Quebecois French. Denizy. She's funny. I think she's a little bit obnoxious sometimes. Like, you know, when someone's trying too hard to be funny. But more overall, I like her. It's a good laugh, and she speaks with a very Quebecois accent. Even though I guess she's originally from French, but she's just lived in Quebec for a long time. All right. Hey, do you think intellectualism is misunderstood, particularly language learning, by the masses? What is the benefit of becoming learned? As you said, in high schools in the US, one takes a language not out of passion, but of mandate. Like, what's the benefit in learning a language? I guess. Well, it depends. Like, it's a very personal thing. For some people, there might not be much benefit, right? Like, if you're just a farm boy and that's what you like, and you know, and you don't really have the time or the money to travel, learning a language might not help you that much. As far as like improving your life, will expand your mind and like help you see things from different ways. Maybe, you know, especially if you get a chance to go travel somewhere else. It'll be a learning experience, and I think it'll make you a more well-rounded person. It's not for everyone. I don't blame people when they don't like learning languages. I think that's fine. I do like to encourage people to try, and to try it the correct way, right? Rather than just going to school and sitting in class. That's wrong. It's not wrong. You won't learn very well, more than likely. I wish people knew better ways of learning languages, rather than just thinking you had to read textbooks and just do drills all the time. Like, there's much more interesting and entertaining and fulfilling ways of doing it. Okay, yeah, sure. My question has like an academic orientation, and what I really like in language is not a purpose for communication, but more than this, like applied linguistics and psychology. What really brings me here is that your great video about that book of Art of Language Intervention. That's really interesting. Yes, what he's talking about is I don't have it up here right now, I don't think, but it's called the Art of Language Intervention. I'm sorry, the Art of Language Invention. And many of you have probably heard me talk about this book before. It's great. It's written by the guy who invented several languages for Game of Thrones, and just talks about linguistics and how he applied that to his job. It's really interesting, and I recommend it. By David Peterson. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth to you all. I don't know a whole lot about Juneteenth. I meant to do some more studying. This was the first year I think I ever really heard people talking about it, which maybe not good. But I want to learn a little bit more now. All right, Quebecois swearing. Yeah, tabarnak. All right, Denizy, yes, she's the one I'm talking about, the Quebecois YouTuber. All right, I've always found it unfair that so many people outside the Anglophone countries have to learn English since they're little children. And native English speakers can travel basically everywhere without knowing the language of that country. But I guess we're fortunate to have such an excellent education on different languages and being able to actually speak it. Yeah, like, it's not fair. You're right. Which, actually, that's the reason Esperanto was invented, right? Because Esperanto was designed to take away the political strength of one language and kind of make it, because it's neutral, right? No one country speaks Esperanto. And it was meant to kind of take away the advantage of people who come in speaking English as their native language. Never really panned out that way, but who knows? Maybe someday. A lot of Esperanto speakers still think that will eventually happen. Doesn't sound likely to me, but I think it would be cool if it did. Anyways, I've been talking for an hour and a half now, and I'm a little bit dehydrated because I didn't bring any water in here. So I'm going to cut it off here. He says, yes, that's why I love Esperanto in the first place. Good. Yeah, so thanks to everyone who joined and who watched, and thanks for your questions and your participation. And I will see you guys soon. Releasing another video coming up on Monday. So see you then.